My name is Renee Marlowe, 42 years old. If you had walked into my life 10 years ago, you might have mistaken it for stability. A husband with a respectable job, a house that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, and a woman, me, who smiled politely when neighbors waved. But stability is a funny thing. Sometimes it's not peace, it's paralysis. Tyler and I had been married for over a decade. On paper, he was everything a woman might want. Marketing director for an outdoor gear brand, a man with ambition, charm when he needed it, and an easy laugh. But if there's one thing I learned in that decade, it's this. Tyler was not just my husband. He was, in every way that mattered, still his mother's son. I used to think Mom Says was just a harmless quirk. Mom says don't keep onions in the fridge. Mom says vinegar works better than those chemical sprays. Cute, almost quaint. I brushed it off, even laughed. But slowly, Mom Says became the third voice in our marriage. Not mine, not his, hers. Darlene lived less than 15 minutes away in Denver, and she treated our home like an extension of her own. No knocking, no courtesy calls, just the sound of a key turning, followed by her sing-song voice. Hello, hope I'm not interrupting. She always was. I could be in a meeting, in the shower, or curled up with a book. It didn't matter. She'd rifle through our pantry, comment on the dust near the baseboards, rearrange the throw pillows. Tyler would beam as though it was love. She's just checking in, he'd tell me. She's conducting inspections, I snapped once. He looked at me as if I'd committed a crime. That was when I learned. In any battle between Renee and Darlene, Tyler was Switzerland. Neutral, but not really. Because neutrality, in a marriage, is betrayal disguised as peace. Holidays were the worst. Darlene always insisted on hosting at our place. You're such a natural hostess, she'd chirp, unloading frozen pies and an unthawed turkey onto my counters. I became the unpaid caterer for 30 relatives whose names I barely remembered. Sticky fingers smeared across my counters, gravy spilled, kids shrieking through the halls. Meanwhile, my own parents were reduced to Zoom calls and missed birthdays. Tyler's response was always the same. We have obligations here. My family counts on us. I faded, room by room. Our intimacy evaporated. We stopped sleeping in the same bed. At first because of his snoring, eventually because words between us grew brittle, sharp, or absent altogether. I thought I had chosen calm when I left my graphic design career to focus on our home, but it wasn't calm. It was suffocation in slow motion. Then, a flicker of hope. Tyler got a promotion, senior VP. He tossed champagne into the grocery cart and, with uncharacteristic generosity, suggested buying the house I'd always liked in Golden. Golden wasn't far, 40 minutes, but far enough from Darlene to taste like freedom. When we moved into that bright, modern house with its wraparound deck and real fireplace, I let myself believe for the first time in years. I even texted my mother, "We're moved in. Maybe you and Dad could visit this spring." For 3 weeks, I almost felt alive again. I painted, I walked the trail behind the house, I dared to believe the air belonged to me. Then Thursday morning came. Tyler, sipping his smoothie casually, dropped it like weather talk. "Mom's coming Saturday, wants to see the place." I forced a smile. "Just her?" He turned to the sink, rinsing his cup. "Well, she's bringing the kids too." "What kids?" "Her sister's grandkids, Bailey's twins, Jenna's boys, a couple more from Linda." "6?" My voice cracked. "She's bringing 6 children into a brand new home, with cream rugs and glass tables?" He chuckled. "They're just kids, don't be dramatic." I remembered Thanksgiving, the flushed turkey sandwich clogging the pipes, the plumber bill. I reminded him. He rolled his eyes. "If you don't like it, just stay in your room." That Saturday, at exactly 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. Before I could reach it, 6 children barreled through, streaks of mud up their legs, shoes pounding on polished floors. Darlene followed, dragging backpacks like a conqueror claiming new territory. "Renee," she sang. "Sweetheart, the place is adorable. You've done wonders." Without pausing, she clapped her hands. "Now, I brought the little ones. They'll need lunch soon, and after that, baths. Mud everywhere. Be a dear and get the tub ready." I froze, vacuum still humming in my hand. "I didn't plan for guests today," I managed. "Oh, relax, you're such a planner," she smirked. "You'll adjust." Tyler appeared, bounding down the stairs like it was Christmas morning. Everyone made it. He glanced at me, added lightly, Babe, if it's too much, maybe step outside or something. Darlene laughed, eyes sparkling like she'd won. Yes, Renee, if you don't like it, leave. They laughed, my husband and his mother, at me. One boy dragged chocolate-smeared hands across the wall. Another yanked down the curtain cord. A crash echoed from the dining room. I stood in the wreckage of my new life, heart thudding in my chest. Something inside me, something bent for too long, snapped. I set down the vacuum, walked upstairs slowly, deliberately. In the bedroom, I opened the closet, pulled out a suitcase, folded clothes into it, steady and calm. My hands didn't shake. Laptop, planner, toothbrush, medication. By the time Tyler appeared in the doorway, I was zipping the bag shut. Renee, what are you doing? His voice was baffled, as though he couldn't imagine this moment belonged to me. You told me to leave, I said evenly. You're seriously doing this? I met his eyes. I'm finally reacting. Darlene appeared behind him, smug fading into alarm. Renee, let's not make a scene. Be reasonable. You brought 6 kids into my home uninvited and told me to clean up after them, I said. This is the scene. I'm just walking out of it. And I did. Down the stairs, past muddy shoes and shattered laughter. Out the door, into silence. I expected tears as the car rolled down the gravel drive. Instead, there was only stillness. Not relief, not panic, just silence. And the sound of tires grinding stone, carrying me away from the house I thought would save me, from the life that had slowly erased me. Somewhere in the distance, I thought I heard the echo of laughter fade. Or maybe it was only the ghost of all the times I'd stayed quiet. But this time, I wasn't quiet. I was gone. The first night after I left, I checked into a hotel off the interstate. A business-class box with beige walls and carpeting that smelled faintly of bleach. The kind of place you stay in not for comfort, but because it exists. The quiet was brutal. No humming from Darlene in the kitchen, no heavy thud of Tyler's footsteps upstairs, just the low hum of the air conditioner and the rattle of ice in the hallway vending machine. I ordered a salad I didn't eat, pulled the curtains tight, and sat in the half-dark with my suitcase open at the foot of the bed. My phone buzzed once, Tyler's name flashing across the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then again. By the 5th call, I shut the phone off completely. Silence was the only thing I wanted. Silence was my rebellion. Morning light broke through the cheap curtains, and I felt the weight of years pressing down, years of swallowing words, of smoothing over chaos. I thought I might cry. Instead, I stared at the ceiling until noon. When I finally picked up my phone, I didn't call Tyler. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. Renee. Her voice cracked. Not from surprise, but from instinct, like she had known all along this call would come someday. I couldn't form words at first. I just breathed. Finally, I whispered, Can I come home for a while? She didn't ask questions. She didn't lecture me. Of course, she said softly, as if she had been holding that answer in her mouth for years. 2 days later, I stepped off the train in Portland. My father stood at the end of the platform, arms crossed, scanning the crowd with the same sharp eyes he used to use when picking me up from college. My mother clutched her purse with one hand and a travel mug of peppermint tea in the other. When she saw me, she broke into a run, hugging me so tightly I thought my ribs would crack. At their house, I sat at the kitchen island while Dad fussed around, making toast I didn't ask for, rearranging chairs that didn't need rearranging. Mom draped a blanket over my shoulders, though the day was warm. It wasn't about warmth, it was about anchoring me. When I finally spoke, it came in bursts, not in order. How Darlene would walk into my home uninvited, how Tyler never defended me, how every holiday had turned into a performance for strangers, while my own parents were left with silence, how I couldn't remember the last time someone asked me if I was okay, and meant it. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Dad's jaw clenched so hard I heard it click. Then I said it. For the first time, the words left my mouth and hung in the air like a verdict. I'm divorcing him. Neither of them gasped. Neither tried to dissuade me. Mom only squeezed my hand. Dad nodded once, firm. Do you need a lawyer? Yes, my voice didn't waver. Through an old college friend, I was referred to Donna Harlow, a woman in her 50s, blunt and efficient, with eyes that felt like x-rays. Her office was lined with law journals and not a single family photo. She listened to me like a therapist but calculated like a surgeon. What do you have to prove interference? She asked, clicking her pen. At first, I hesitated. Then I opened my laptop. Years of ignored instincts had at least left me meticulous. Screenshots of Darlene's texts. Make sure the sheets are clean before we arrive. Children have sensitive skin. Grocery list she sent for dinners she decided I would host. A voice memo from Thanksgiving. Tyler snapping, just shut up and do what mom says. Dana's eyebrow lifted. This isn't just emotional neglect. This is documented. Good. Good. That word landed strange in my chest. My misery had become evidence. She leaned back. Renee, you're not just leaving a husband. You're challenging a dynasty. This woman has controlled not only your life, but your husband's entire extended family. The minute you pull the first thread, the whole fabric might unravel. Her words sent a shiver down my spine. I pictured Darlene's smile at the doorway, her triumph in small humiliations, the family orbiting her like planets around a sun. And I thought, if that orbit shatters, will they hate me? Or will they finally see her for what she is? That night, lying in my childhood bedroom under faded posters and the faint scent of lavender detergent, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every laugh, every dismissal, every moment Tyler chose neutrality over loyalty. And for the first time, I realized the story I had been living wasn't marriage. It was servitude dressed as compromise. I thought silence had been my rebellion. But Dana was right. The real battle hadn't even begun. By the third day in Portland, the calls became relentless. My phone lit up again and again with Tyler's name. I ignored the first 10. By the 15th, curiosity outweighed contempt. When I finally answered, his voice was frantic, pitched higher than I'd ever heard it. Renee, thank God. Please, you have to come back. He choked on the words. It's a disaster. I leaned against the porch railing, mug of coffee cooling in my hand. What kind of disaster? The kids. They trashed the house. Crayons all over the walls, juice stains on the rug. Mom tried to give them a bath, and she slipped. She's mostly fine, just bruised her hip. But God, Renee, it's chaos. I can't do this. I closed my eyes. The absurdity of it would have been funny if it hadn't been tragic. Why are you telling me this? Because you left me in the middle of what you allowed, I cut in. You invited them in. You laughed when your mother told me to leave. This is what you chose. For a moment, only silence, then his voice smaller. I'm sorry, I really am. I let the pause stretch, watched a gust of wind rattle the leaves across my parents' yard. Finally, I said, I'll come back, but only for one thing. Relief flooded his tone. You will? Yes, for your signature on the divorce papers. 5 days later, Dana and I drove back to Colorado. I expected resistance, theatrics. I wasn't disappointed. Darlene opened the door wearing a stiff foam neck brace, her expression a cocktail of pain and martyrdom. Oh, honey, she crooned, as if greeting a prodigal friend. It's been a madhouse without you. I'm so glad you came to your senses. I didn't, I said flatly. Behind her, Tyler appeared. He looked smaller. Not physically, but diminished, as if the scaffolding of his pride had collapsed. His hair was uncombed, his shirt wrinkled. For a moment, pity flickered in me, like a dying match. Then I remembered every time he chose her voice over mine, and the flame went out. We gathered in the dining room, the same table where Darlene once handed me a Thanksgiving menu on a clipboard. Dana sat beside me, crisp blazer, silent authority. I spread the papers out like a surgeon laying out instruments. You're really doing this? Tyler asked, voice breaking. Yes. I thought we were working through it. You didn't even give me a chance to change. I studied his face, the faint lines of desperation etched there. You told me to leave, Tyler, more than once. I finally listened. I didn't mean it. Words have weight, I said, especially when you repeat them. His gaze darted to his mother, as if searching for rescue. But for once, Darlene said nothing. Her painted lips pressed tight, her eyes calculating. The silence between them was louder than any argument. I stood. I'll need 30 minutes alone to gather my things. After that, I'm staying at a hotel. Dana will finalize the papers. Tyler slumped back in his chair, defeated. Dana's pen scratched across the document, every stroke sealing the end of a decade. On my way upstairs, I paused at the landing. The walls still bore faint streaks of marker from the children, ghostly scribbles of chaos. The rug was stained, the curtain rod missing. The house I once thought would save me had already been ruined, not by accident, but by neglect. As I folded the last of my clothes into a suitcase, I realized the truth. I wasn't just divorcing Tyler. I was dismantling the empire Darlene had built around control. The first crack had split open. The rest would follow. Back in Portland, life unfolded quietly, like a blanket being shaken out after years in storage. My parents' guest room became a sanctuary. The wallpaper was dated, the bedspread a patchwork of floral prints, but for the first time in years, I slept without waking to someone else's demands. Mom filled the fridge with food she remembered I loved a decade ago: cherry yogurt, almond butter, dark chocolate-covered pretzels. I didn't even tell her she was wrong about some of it. I let her fuss, because it felt like care. Dad printed out job listings from the library bulletin board and left them on my pillow like I was 19 again. At first, I smiled politely. Then, one night, I actually read one. A boutique marketing agency downtown was hiring a part-time creative lead, branding for eco-startups, nonprofits, small, purposeful work. I dusted off my old portfolio, added some freelance pieces I'd done over the years, and hit send almost on a whim. To my shock, they replied that same afternoon. The creative director wanted to meet the next day. I stared at the email for a long time, nerves colliding with something I hadn't felt in years: anticipation. At the interview, I wore a blazer that hadn't seen daylight since before Tyler's promotion. I spoke about design like I used to, like it mattered, like I mattered. The director nodded, asked sharp questions, smiled at my answers. When she shook my hand at the end, her grip was firm. "We'll be in touch." By the time I walked back to my car, my phone pinged. "We'd like to offer you the role." That night, sitting at my parents' table, I told them. Dad lifted his glass of iced tea like it was champagne. Mom's eyes shone with tears she tried to blink away. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. Working again felt like slipping back into my own skin. I wasn't Tyler's wife or the woman apologizing for Darlene's intrusions. I was Renee Marlowe, designer, problem solver, someone with her own voice. Within weeks, I found a small apartment not far from my parents. 2 bedrooms, big windows, a corner balcony, just wide enough for a chair and a potted fern. I painted one wall deep green, bought a secondhand bookshelf, and filled it with novels I hadn't had time to read during my marriage. Every Saturday, I walked to the farmer's market, carrying home flowers and coffee beans in a canvas tote. It was ordinary, and it was freedom. But freedom comes with echoes. Mutual friends called occasionally, uninvited but insistent. "Tyler's not the same," one said. Withdrawn. He left his job, moved back in with Darlene. Another mentioned that the wider family had started pulling away after the Thanksgiving disaster. "Turns out, nobody really liked how much she controlled things. You just happened to be the first to walk out." I thought I'd feel satisfaction. Instead, I felt nothing. Their orbit had collapsed, but I was no longer circling their sun. Months later, a package arrived at my apartment with no return address. Inside was a box, and on top, a folded note in handwriting I knew too well. "Thought you might want this. Sorry it took me so long to understand. T." My chest tightened as I lifted out the object. It was our wedding photo, the one Darlene insisted we frame for the foyer so guests could admire how classy we looked. Tyler in a black suit, me in ivory lace, our smiles carefully rehearsed. I stared at it for a long time. Then, without ceremony, I slid the photo from its frame. I carried it onto the balcony, set it in a small ceramic bowl, and struck a match. The flames curled through the paper slowly, almost reverently, until our frozen smiles warped into smoke. The ashes lifted into the night air, dissolving into nothing. Watching them scatter, I felt a strange peace. Not triumph, not bitterness, just release. I closed the balcony door and stood in the stillness of my new home. The wall was still green, the fern still alive, the bookshelf still waiting. Life was no longer about survival, it was about beginning again. But as I turned off the light, I knew one thing. Even in ashes, the past leaves a shadow. A year after I turned the knob and walked out, I set the table for 3. 2 candles rescued from old wine bottles, linen napkins I found at a thrift shop, spinach ravioli I'd rolled out on my kitchen counter and arranged like little crescent moons. The apartment smelled like butter and garlic and the basil plant I kept coaxing back to life. I checked the door twice, not because I expected an intruder, but because habit had taught me to anticipate disruption, Tonight, I wanted the opposite. I wanted a night that stayed where I'd put it. My parents arrived early. Dad held a bottle of white wine like a trophy. Mom carried a bakery box and her habit of smoothing my hair, even when there was nothing to smooth. We fell into that easy choreography families have, the shrugging off of jackets, the clink of plates, the soft shuffle of chairs. Mom peeked at the ravioli, nodded like a judge at a regional bake-off. Dad set the wine down and examined my linen napkins, pronouncing them sturdy. We ate slowly. Conversation wandered. Work stories, neighborhood rumors, a possible spring trip to the coast. At some point, Mom asked about the fern on the balcony. At another, Dad insisted my knives needed professional sharpening and volunteered himself as the professional. We laughed until the room felt warmer than the candles could account for. When plates were scraped clean, Dad lifted his glass again, not as a toast to the past, but as one to the right now. "You did the hard thing, kid," he said, voice steady. "Most people stay. You didn't." Mom put her hand over mine. "You finally started living your life on your terms," she said. And there it was, the benediction I didn't know I'd been waiting for. After dessert, after the kitchen was clean and the candles were stubs, after Dad made a joke about how my apartment finally smelled like a home and not a catalog, they rose to leave. Mom hugged me a fraction longer than usual, the kind of hug that says we survived it. Dad stepped into the hall, then back, then tapped the doorframe like he was marking it. This place, this daughter, this life. When their footsteps faded, the silence that settled wasn't empty, it was full, the way the sea is full even when it looks flat. I stood in the doorway and listened to it. The hum of the refrigerator, a car passing below. Somewhere far off, a dog barking twice, and then deciding whatever it had to say could wait until morning. People ask me if I regret it. Not strangers. Strangers don't ask. Old friends who know just enough to be curious. New colleagues who sense edges but not the map. Relatives who believe in forgiveness as an obligation. "Do you ever wish you'd tried harder?" they say, as if harder were the key. "Do you ever think maybe he would have changed?" Here's what I tell them. I regret how long I waited. I regret the quiet ways I taught people to overlook me. I regret every holiday I spent stirring gravy for 30 people I didn't love while my parents set 2 plates across the country. I regret every time I believed neutrality was kindness and swallowed my own voice to keep the room calm. But I do not regret the door, do not regret the suitcase, do not regret the quiet hotel room where I turned my phone off and let the world be loud somewhere else. I do not regret the lawyer's pen, or the singed photo ash drifting off my balcony, or the way my last name looks on a new mailbox. I used to think redemption needed trumpets, a spectacle, a crowd, proof stamped by other people's applause. Now I understand it's quieter, a daily choosing. It's buying a basil plant even though you killed the last 2. It's showing up early to a job you like and leaving on time because you're not trying to earn a place you already own. It's making ravioli on a Tuesday. It's a parent's voice on the phone saying, "What do you want for dinner?" and knowing they really mean, "What do you need to feel like yourself?" I kept waiting for a grand finale. Instead, life handed me movement, slow, ordinary, miraculous. Recovery is not a fireworks show. It's a dimmer switch turning toward dawn. Once, a few months after the photo burned, I saw Tyler across a grocery store aisle. He was holding a basket with bread and a single apple, the way people do when they haven't learned how to shop for a life. He didn't see me, or maybe he did and looked through me, the way you look through a window when you're checking your reflection. I wondered if he still lived with Darlene. I wondered if she still used vinegar on everything, if Sundays still sounded like her version of kindness, busy, bustling, barbed. I didn't say his name. I didn't step closer or step away. I stayed exactly where I was, comparing prices on olive oil I could now afford on my own, and felt no tug, no ache, only a thin strand of gratitude that finally snapped and drifted down like a loose thread. I left the aisle with one bottle in my basket and an unexpected lightness in my chest. News trickled in, because it always does. A cousin I barely knew sent a message on social media about everything imploding at Darlene's holiday gathering. 2 nieces refused to bring their kids. A brother-in-law snapped at the pie, and then, at Darlene, a sister declared she was done hosting on command. The family hadn't revolved around her that night, and the sun had seemed confused about where to set. I read the message and felt the strange, weightless dignity of not attending your own vindication. Their collapse did not require my witness. On the anniversary night, after my parents left, I washed 3 plates and set them in the rack to dry. I wiped the countertop and turned off the kitchen light. The apartment exhaled, and I exhaled with it. I went to the balcony and stepped into the cool air. The city glowed quietly, windows lit like islands, a plane blinking far above, the soundscape of a place that had accepted me and asked for nothing back. You did it, I told myself. Not you escaped, not you survived. You did the brave thing and the daily thing. You built a life that doesn't require apologies to exist. Inside, I opened a drawer and found the wedding band I had forgotten I still owned. It didn't stab when I touched it. It was just a circle of metal, shiny and obedient. I took it to the sink and held it under the tap. Water beaded and rolled off, proof that some surfaces are designed to shed. I dried it with a towel and tucked it into an envelope marked with the date I walked out and the word kept. I didn't keep it because I wanted to remember the vow. I kept it because I wanted to remember the leaving. Sometimes the most sacred acts are exit rituals. Before bed, I wrote a letter I didn't send. Not to him, to the version of me that stayed too long. I told her I forgave her for believing patience would one day be rewarded with partnership. I told her she was not foolish for longing. I thanked her for every time she swallowed anger rather than spit it back, because anger would have made her forget the precise shape of her grief. And grief, honest and unornamented, is the teacher that finally walks you to the door. I folded the letter, slid it beneath the basil pot on the windowsill, and turned off the lamp. In the dim, the room became what rooms become when no one is performing inside them, a place that knows you by your breathing. Sometimes I wonder how the story will be told when I'm old and the details have softened. The key in the door that wasn't mine, the laughter that told on itself, the suitcase zipper closing like a line being drawn. Maybe I'll forget whether the rug was cream or bone, whether it was snowing the day I signed the papers. Memory loves a good edit. But I don't think I'll forget the feeling of my hand on the doorknob, or the way the air on the other side wasn't cold like I feared. It was normal air. It was mine. If there is anything sacred about a breaking point, it is that it opens. That is its holiness, its shock. It is not the wound, it is the passage. I used to whisper prayers at night that began, "Make me stronger." Now I say something simpler when I wake, something that fits inside a mouth without straining. Make me honest. Honest enough to leave when love becomes a set of instructions. Honest enough to stay when fear tells me to run from joy. Honest enough to put basil in the sun even when the forecast says clouds. I turned off the last light. In the dark, the apartment held its shape. So did I. I am living on my terms, and the world has not collapsed. It has expanded to fit me. The door behind me stayed shut. The door ahead keeps opening.